What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. I'm Mike Tagliere here with you for week 14. It's the first week of the fantasy playoffs, which, well, let's just be honest. It's been a long year, but it's been a quick season. I feel like we got to the fantasy playoffs, and it's going to be bittersweet for me. But we have another 3 weeks. We're going to get through this. We're going to win some championships, and hopefully you guys are playing in your fantasy playoffs, and I can do everything I can to help you. As we do at the beginning of every single show on Sunday morning, I run through the injuries because there's been a lot of things that have kind of popped up later in the week that some may have missed. So I'm going to run through those real quick just to let you guys know in case there's anything that you may have missed. Julio Jones is not going to play in this game. Obviously, Calvin Ridley receives a little bump from that. You were playing him already. Russell Gage becomes a desperation option. Hayden Hurst, I don't know if it helps him or hurts him, but what I do know is that when Julio Jones has been out of the lineup, it's definitely hurt him. It's also hurt Matt Ryan quite a bit. So I've slid him down my rankings just a little bit as the week's gone on. DJ Moore, not going to play. He's still on the COVID list. He's going to be, I would say he's probably going to be questionable for next week too, but Curtis Samuel was cleared. He's going to play in today's game. I have him in wide receiver 3 territory. Antonio Gibson, not going to play. Dr. Chow basically said he thinks this could be basically a rest of the season thing where you really don't have Antonio Gibson in your fantasy lineup. So be prepared for that. Kenny Galladay, not going to play. No surprise there. David Johnson popped up on the COVID list. He had to leave the team for personal reasons. So COVID protocol, he can't play. He didn't travel with the team. And on top of that, the Houston Texans, this morning, we just got news that Brandon Cooks is not going to play in this game. So Brandon Cooks is out. There's a whole lot of pieces missing on that team. Deshaun Watson drops to my QB 10 on the week. I don't even feel great about that. Kiki QT is a wide receiver 3 that you could play. Should come with a solid floor. I don't know how high his ceiling is because, again, we've never seen Deshaun Watson play in Chicago type weather. I went for a walk this morning. It's like 29 degrees outside. It's not a particularly great day, but it's not snowing, so that's a positive. But either way, he should be a high floor option that you can play. Myles Gaskin, he's someone that popped up that was ruled out yesterday, which really stinks. So he's going to be out of the lineup. They're going to have DeAndre Washington filling in for him. DeAndre Washington going against his former team, the Chiefs. I have him as the RB28, if I'm not mistaken, on the week. Could be better than that, to be honest with you, but I just don't feel comfortable putting ahead of some guys like maybe like Raheem Mostert. So that's where he's at in the rankings. Joe Mixon, obviously still not going to play. Drew Brees not going to play. Denzel Mims was ruled out. Some guys that are really questionable. Jamison Crowder popped up on Friday on the injury report. Did not practice. They're saying he's questionable. I don't think I really expect him to play. He hasn't played through soft tissue injuries this year. I don't see it happening right now, especially considering that happened on Friday. So don't like that. Josh Jacobs is expected to come back to the lineup. Good news. The bad news is he's playing against the Indianapolis Colts, a team that's extremely good against running backs. So, he's slotted in, I think, at RB22 in the ranks. I would be torn between him and some other options, and I'm sure I'm going to get some questions on him throughout the day. Christian McCaffrey, he was listed as doubtful. He's not going to play. So Mike Davis, RB2, I'm fine playing him. Austin Hooper was questionable. Haven't heard anything on him this morning, but I'm assuming he's going to play. Kyle Rudolph is doubtful. And then Frank Gore is expected to play. I don't know. There's some weird reports about Frank Gore right now in regards to he had one more step to clear in the concussion protocol, but they were on the road and they don't bring independent neurologists on the road. I don't know what's going on there. But Frank Gore, it seems like he's going to play, but hopefully you have better options because that is an afternoon game. So if you don't have other options, you probably are forced to go with someone else. So that wraps up the injuries, guys. Every single week, I swear it feels like I don't know. There's too many injuries this year. There's too many things that have been popping up, but we're doing our best to get through them. And I'm going to do my best I can to help you guys today make some of those tough decisions. So for the next hour, I am going to be going through all these questions and answering as many as I possibly can. So guys, do me a favor. All I ask of you in this one is that you narrow your question down to 2 or 3 players because I want to get to as many as I can. I do talk in depth through a lot of these questions, and if there's too many players, it runs on too long. So try and narrow it down to 2 or 3 players. Otherwise, I have to skip over it. I'm sorry. All right, I'm going to start with Forrest, DJ Chark, or Chase Claypool. It's a really good question. I have Claypool, I think, 1 spot higher in my rankings than I do Chark, just because Chark hasn't lived up to what the expectation was coming into the season. Does that mean he can't succeed against this Tennessee Titans secondary? No, it doesn't. But if you look at Tennessee in terms of the competition they've played and then on a per target basis, so there's like a weighted schedule thing here. wide receivers have not actually been as good as people think against Tennessee. It's just the volume, and then they've also played some really, really good wide receivers. So it hasn't been as great as some think. Now, Claypool, on the other hand, he was someone that took a dip in snaps last week, and nobody really knew why. We were kind of wondering, and then Mike Tomlin came out after the game and started talking about Deontay Johnson, saying, if you can't catch the ball, we're going to find someone that can. Chase Claypool hasn't had an issue with drops this year. He really hasn't. He's actually been pretty good in contested catch situations. So I think that he popped up with some sort of illness. So I don't know if that's what was limiting him last week, but he's good to go. He's playing. I'm going to trust Chase Claypool a little bit more than DJ Chark just because I trust his quarterback. So when it comes to guys that you're like extremely torn between and you're like, I could see it either way, I'm going to lean with the guy with the better quarterback, and that's clearly Ben Roethlisberger over Mike Glennon. All right, Vikram, please help me in picking 2 wide receivers. All right, there's already four players in there. I got to skip over it. Narrow it down a little bit. Daniel Lindsay, Zeke, or Jonathan Taylor? I have Zeke higher. So Jonathan Taylor is a guy that's obviously been getting more and more touches as the weeks go on. But if you look at the snap counts, you look at the touch counts, he's not the workhorse. He's not getting that role. And before he scored a touchdown last week, people were wondering, where is Jonathan Taylor? I do believe he's going to have a role. I do have him ranked as like a top 15 running back this week. However, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know he's going to get 20 touches in this game. I can say that about Ezekiel Elliott going against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are one of the teams in the league who are allowing more than 5 yards per carry. So I'd play Ezekiel Elliott there and play it safer. Christopher asks, for my dog's team, DeAndre Washington or Giovanni Bernard? I have Giovanni Bernard higher. I could definitely see a case where you wanted to play Washington. So a lot of teams, what they do is when they go against the Kansas City Chiefs, well, I'm going to clear up a misconception. We talk about it all the time in this show, is that I hear analysts all the time talking about, oh, this team's going to fall behind the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to throw the ball. Wide receivers are going to be valuable. That's not how it works. The Kansas City Chiefs have been one of the better teams in the league against wide receivers, and it's why I'm kind of down on Devontae Parker this week. But at the same time, running backs are the ones that are getting a lot of that production. You know, teams want to run the ball against Kansas City. The problem is they do fall behind, but running backs are still getting their touches in the passing game. So I'm expecting DeAndre Washington to get 15-plus touches in this game. You know, Salvon Ahmed is out of the game. Myles Gaskin's out. Matt Breida is never someone that they wanted to trust. So I do believe that DeAndre Washington should be a relatively safe play. However, did you see that Dallas Cowboys defense against the Baltimore Ravens allow over 250 yards rushing? It was kind of ridiculous watching it go on as the game went through, because the team is just clearly they have issues there. You know, Mike Nolan is the defensive coordinator. What are they going to do? Mike McCarthy is saying it's not the scheme that's the problem. He's saying it's the players. I'm sure the players take that very well, but Giovanni Bernard, I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no risk to him. There is, because he's a guy that hasn't been getting, you know, more than I think 13 carries in the last 3 weeks. That's problematic. But this is a game where it should be semi-competitive. I think the spread on this one is within 3 points. So I would go Bernard just because I have a few game script concerns for DeAndre Washington and how much do they involve Patrick Laird? How much do they involve Matt Breida? I could 100% see playing DeAndre Washington. I don't think it's out of the question. If your gut is telling you to play DeAndre Washington, I have no issue with that. I'm just trying to talk you through that decision and how I'd feel. And if it were my lineup, I'm going to work through this one, man. Chris, I'm sure I'm going to have other questions about DeAndre Washington as we work through the show, and I'm going to think about this as we go on, because seriously, he's a guy that I haven't had much time to react to, because on Saturdays are the one day that I try and take away from football and I try and do other things. So I was working on my car. And you know, I sat down this morning and I started going through it, and I'm moving DeAndre Washington up. I just don't think I can move him above Bernard right now. All right, let's see. Thomas asked, Mostert, Allen Lazard, or T.Y. Hilton in a PPR flex. In a PPR, Mostert is not worth a whole lot, and it's really frustrating to see that the way they used him and Jeff Wilson last week, but he's still a running back. He's still getting guaranteed touches. It's difficult to pass that up. He has gotten a few targets per week, so we can't say that he's not involved in the passing game at all. It's not like he's Sony Michel or Damian Harris. Allen Lazard is someone that, good matchup against Detroit. I do like it in the slot there. However, you have game script concerns there. You know, Yates was asking me this morning about, why is Lazard ranked down 47? I think he was in ECR. And I was like, I think it's due to game script, because it's possible the Packers walk in there into Detroit and they run the ball a lot. They just stomp Detroit on the ground. Aaron Rodgers throws the ball 25, 28 times, something like that. In that, you know, you already know that Devontae Adams is getting his. So it's like, ooh, there's game script concerns for sure. With Lazard. Hilton, I don't want to sit here and pretend that Hilton's over his slump. You know what I mean? Like, he was a guy that was in a year-long slump. It was like, okay, is he at the end of his career? And then all of a sudden he pops up, and now he has a big game against the Texans, which he always has a big game against the Texans. It's just something that T.Y. Hilton does. I don't know what it is, but he always has a big game against them. Now going against the Raiders, I don't know if I feel the same way. I'd probably play Mostert and just take the guaranteed touches because, again, T.Y. Hilton was a guy that had not finished as a top 36 wide receiver for like legit, I think it was like 14 or 15 games straight. And now that he's popped back up on the radar, people want to play him, and I get it, but I would rather take the guaranteed touches and hope that, Mostert gets 15 plus there. Andreas, PPR, Duke Johnson or Miles Sanders? That one's tough. I mean, I'm going to go Miles Sanders just because I don't think that Duke Johnson has a very good matchup against the Bears. I hate Miles Sanders' matchup. I really do. Against the New Orleans Saints. They're the best run defense in the NFL, and it's not all that close, really. I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a team that stops the run, but they do allow some production through the air. The Saints have just not allowed production to running backs, period. They're a team. I'll look at it right now so I can just pop it up for you. And let's see. No running back this year has topped 16 PPR points against them. They've played against Aaron Jones. They played against Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery. And Miles Sanders is a guy that minimal touches last week. Now they have Jalen Hurts coming under center. He's going to steal some of those carries. They obviously have Jordan Howard activated from the practice squad. Boston Scott's going to get a couple touches. So when you start looking at, okay, the Saints are really, really good against the run. I mean, no running back has finished better than RB15 against them this year. That's kind of ridiculous. Just 2 running backs have finished inside the top 20. So, when we're in week 14, like to hear those numbers is kind of crazy. So you really do try to avoid them. But again, going back to Duke Johnson against the Bears, another good run defense. We know that Duke Johnson struggles to get it done on the ground, but he is the only running back there. And they're slowly running out. I mean, think about this, right? They traded away DeAndre Hopkins. We already knew that. Will Fuller gets suspended. Randall Cobb, now he's on IR. Kenny Stills, they cut him. Brandon Cooks now out for this game. So it's like David Johnson also. So they're running out of these players, but the Bears, again, that's another team that has defended running backs in the passing game extremely well. The Bears, I think, are one of 3 teams in the NFL who have still yet to allow a receiving touchdown to a running back. So I'm not huge on Duke Johnson, so I guess I'm going to take the breakaway upside because Miles Sanders does have one play upside, and he showed that against the Steelers. The Steelers was a brutal matchup earlier in the year, but he broke a long run for a touchdown, and it was like that. That's what can carry Miles Sanders, so that's what I would hope for. I don't like either matchup for these guys, but I would play Miles Sanders. Let's see, Doc G, Carlson or Suckup? I mean, dude, kickers to me are... I'm just going to look at my rankings because, honestly, I'm going to be honest, I don't spend a whole lot of time on kickers. I'll go Suckup. Suckup's definitely higher in my rankings. I'm saying that, obviously, we expect that to be a higher scoring game. I'm just going to look for the guaranteed points in the matchups. So, whereas Carlson, I don't know. I would, like I said, I'm going to go back to Suckup. I'll play him. Let's see. Full PPR, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marvin Jones, or Devontae Parker. I'd go with Juju. I know that he has not done a whole lot lately, but he, in terms of like you're in a PPR format, that obviously helps you, right? Because he's been catching balls, he's been seeing targets, and you look at Buffalo and you say, okay, Tre'Davious White is their top cornerback. He's the guy that typically shuts guys down. He plays on the perimeter only, whereas Juju's in the slot, 80% of the time. So Juju, in the matchup against Buffalo, I expect him to do pretty well in this game. This should be a game where Pittsburgh should run the ball a little bit on Buffalo, but the problem is that Pittsburgh's offensive line is getting no push up front. I've looked at this, and I kind of wondered why the Steelers were struggling to run the football this year. And it was like this was always a run-first team. Not a run-first team, but they were a team that definitely had good balance on offense where they could run the ball, and you knew the running backs were going to get 20-plus touches. It hasn't been that way this year, and I think part of it has to do with that the offensive line is pass blocking top-notch. Like, they're not letting anybody by. But they're not getting any push in the run game. Their running backs are averaging just 1.00, or actually 0.92 yards before contact this year. That's what they're averaging. So, you have to go back to the air. You have to find where this production is going to come from. And I think Juju has the best matchup on the field of the Steelers wide receivers this week. Not that I'd say he's the best play, but I do think that he's the safest. So I'd go with Juju. Chris asked, have PPR, sit 1, Mostert, Dobbins, Tim Patrick. I'm worried about the 49ers-Washington matchup. Yeah, it's not a great matchup. I won't lie. Tim Patrick's matchup is not as great because Dante Jackson is returning to the lineup. Tim Patrick, not only do you have the matchup concerns that you have against Carolina, because Carolina has been better against the pass than I think people expected them to be this year, things have started to shift more towards what we thought they would be at the beginning of or towards the second half of the season, but they still haven't been a horrible pass defense that you could just pass all over. Tim Patrick's continually underrated. The guy has finished as a top 36 wide receiver, I think, in 7 of the last 9 games where they actually had a quarterback. So he's been really good, but you have those questions about the matchup. You have those questions about Drew Lock. I think I have to take the guaranteed touches with the running backs. Juju or Mike Williams, half PPR. I play Juju. I do like Mike Williams, especially in like a DFS tournament this week. I'm a big Williams fan this week. I think that he could have one of those weeks you're kind of like, damn, I wish I had him in all my lineups. But at the same time, he has not been consistent enough to plug into your lineup over someone like Juju. Again, Juju does have a good matchup, but Mike Williams' matchup against Atlanta is so good. But here's the problem. The reason I can't move Mike Williams like into my top 25 wide receivers because I love him so much is because there's so many good matchups there against Atlanta, right? You have Keenan Allen, who's going to generate double-digit targets. You know that, right? You have Hunter Henry, who's constantly getting targets. Atlanta's terrible against tight ends. Atlanta also gives up a lot of productions to running backs in the passing game. So there's just a lot of reasons why I'm a little bit I can't go all in on Mike Williams, but I do like him this week, just to be fair. All right, let's see. Dobbins or Gordon in a PPR format. This is tough. I have them both in the same territory. I think that the consensus has Dobbins higher, but I don't necessarily understand it. Cleveland hasn't been a team that's been allowing a whole lot of production on the ground to running backs. We know that the Ravens running backs are not involved in the passing game at all. But Melvin Gordon has been sharing carries with Phillip Lindsay, so it's like a give or take thing. I have Dobbins at 18. I have Gordon at 19. I don't know how to feel about this one. I can certainly say that Gordon, I think, has a higher ceiling against Carolina than Dobbins does because, again, Dobbins is in a 3-way timeshare. They're not going to go away from that. It's just there's only been one game this year where I think he's played more than like 60% of the snaps, and that's including the games where Mark Ingram was out. So, and then last week, I don't even know. Against Dallas, it was like he wasn't even in the game. Then all of a sudden when he came in, he's explosive and like he's running for chunks of yardage at a time. But if he's not on the field, he can't get that done. And in a game against Cleveland, a much tougher run defense than Dallas, you're going to need some volume to get it done. So I'm a little concerned about him. I do have him one spot higher than Melvin Gordon, but it's more like it's factoring upside and floor, right? I think Melvin Gordon might be the safer play there, but it's tough. Let's see. Christopher, Juju Smith-Schuster or Duke Johnson? I guess it depends on the format. If it's like a standard format, I'd say probably Duke Johnson. If it's a full PPR, I'd probably go Juju. Eric Neville asks, Josh Jacobs or J.K. Dobbins PPR? I'd go Dobbins there. I mean, Josh Jacobs, the matchup against Indianapolis, is a terrible matchup for running backs. Like, terrible. The only running back, going back to the time when Frank Reich came in there, the only running back who has rushed for more than 100 yards against them is Derrick Henry. He's done it multiple times, but he's the only running back to do it. Josh Jacobs, he's not going to hit 100 yards on the ground. We know he's not involved in the passing game. Do we expect him to score a rushing touchdown? That's what it comes down to, and that's why I have him as like a back-end RB2. I might be a little too low on him considering, but I think that they may share some of that workload between him and Devontae Booker just because he is coming back from that injury, that ankle injury. So I will say I'll go with Dobbins there, but it's close. All right. All right, Chris Baker asked, Marquise Brown or Ty Johnson half PPR? I mean, I don't know if we have official word on Frank Gore just yet. I'll try and keep an eye on that. Frank Gore, all we have is that he's expected to play. I didn't know if there was more official news right now, but there's not. I'd probably go with Marquise Brown, to be honest with you. If you look at Lamar Jackson the last 3 times that he's played against the Cleveland Browns, he has thrown for at least 3 touchdowns. He's thrown for quite a bit of yardage. This is like his best matchup, you know. Certain quarterbacks just match up well with opposing defenses, the schemes, and it's almost like Mitch Trubisky, right, against Detroit Lions. Plays well against them. You look at Lamar Jackson, obviously. And if you go back to week 1 this year, even when Lamar Jackson hasn't been at his best, Lamar Jackson threw for, I think it was 270 yards and 3 touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken. So Marquise Brown's been involved. I mean, he's getting the targets, had a good game against them in week 1. So I will go with Marquise Brown there. Mike Davis or Clyde Edwards-Helaire PPR, I'd play Mike Davis. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just, ever since Le'Veon Bell got there, the weighted opportunity for him hasn't been there. He's getting some targets in the passing game, but in terms of weighted opportunity, he's probably around the RB25, RB30 range ever since Le'Veon Bell got there. So it's just not enough opportunity where he has to be uber efficient. And the Chiefs, once they get into the red zone, we know that they don't want to run the ball. They look, they go to Mahomes, and rightfully so. Patrick Mahomes is involved in like all their touchdowns. So can Clyde Edwards pop off and have 2 touchdowns like he did against I think it was the Raiders a couple weeks ago? Sure, I could definitely see it, but are you banking on it? No. Mike Davis is a guy that will have 15 plus touches. You really don't have to worry too much about that. So I'll go Mike Davis. Let's see. And also the Denver Broncos have really been struggling. That secondary obviously is beat up. They're missing their 3 starting cornerbacks. They're missing Mike Purnell. Once they lost Purnell on the defensive line, that's when they kind of went to crap. And teams have been running all over them. So I think Mike Davis is going to have some success in that game. Let's see. Thelonious, Jacobs or Gio, full PPR. That's where it's really tough. I get to my rankings, and I'm going to pull them up just so I can see where I have Jacobs at 22, Bernard at 23. I don't feel strongly about that, though. I want you to know that if you wanted to play Giovanni Bernard over Josh Jacobs, I have no issue with that. They're right next to each other in my rankings. It's more about all right, the guaranteed roles, because again, Giovanni Bernard has not topped 13 carries since he hasn't topped 12 carries since week 8. He hasn't topped 15 carries all season. So clearly they're not going to give him the lion's share. He's had more than 37 rushing yards just once this year, and Dallas doesn't really allow a whole lot of production through the air to running back. So maybe Gio goes a little bit further down. But yeah, I guess I'll play Jacobs there and just hope for a touchdown. I think that he's got a better shot because he plays in a better offense. Corey Haytags, full PPR, pick 1, Jefferson, Godwin, Deontay Johnson. You're playing Jefferson at this point. There's no way I can't. Jamel Dean for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is out. He's their starting cornerback. I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, but I am assuming that if the Bucs shadow any wide receiver, it's going to be Adam Thielen. If they shadow anybody with Carlton Davis would be on Adam Thielen. If they don't shadow, I think it's just going to be a play aside situation. I don't think there's any chance that Jefferson gets shadowed by Carlton Davis. So knowing that Jamel Dean is out, I think this is a big upgrade for Jefferson. It could be even bigger, again, if Carlton Davis does shadow Adam Thielen. So Jefferson, he's a must play at this point. He really is, especially in a game where the Vikings are going to have to throw. If you go and look through Jefferson's game log and you say, all right, where's the games that he succeeded? Where didn't he? You look at the games where Kirk Cousins throws the ball. Same thing with Adam Thielen, right? Because this team has averaged fewer than 30 pass attempts per game, but there have been games where even once you get over 28 pass attempts, that's when these guys skyrocket, and there's going to be that many pass attempts against the Bucs this week. They're not going to be able to run the ball like they typically do. So I do like Jefferson. I do like Thielen quite a bit. I'd play those guys. Matthew Dobbins or James Conner, half PPR. I have Conner higher. Because again, I talked about that earlier in the show, that James Conner is someone that they should be able to run the ball on Buffalo this week. I think that this is a plus matchup for Conner. He is a guy that's coming off a couple weeks of rest, which is good. I mean, this time of the year, if you go back and look at David Montgomery, right? He was a guy that, he suffered the concussion. They ruled him out the 1 week. He had his bye week the next, and then he came back and he looked so good. He looked fantastic against the Packers. He looked fantastic against the Lions. And I think that comes down to running backs being fresh this time of the year. DeAndre Swift wasn't started at the beginning of the year, and all of a sudden it's like they gave him a workhorse role. He dominates. He looks so good. You look at, even on Thursday night, Cam Akers is a guy that he hasn't touched the ball a whole lot this year. He has fresh legs. I think that James Conner has fresh legs coming into this game. Dobbins obviously involved in a 3-way timeshare. Again, I think Conner's matchup is probably better than Dobbins' too, so I'd play Conner. Ivy asked Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Giovanni Bernard. I'd play Clyde there. Give me the offense, because again, I talked about Gio and the concerns I have with him in the matchup he's in. It's not because the Cowboys scare you. It has to do with his actual role in the offense and what he's been limited to or capped at. Whereas Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's going to get those 12-plus touches in this game. He is fresh now that, again, that's another guy. He's had a couple weeks of rest now. He should be fresh for this game against Miami. Miami does well with their perimeter cornerbacks. I just expect Clyde Edwards-Helaire to be utilized a little bit in this game, a little more than Giovanni Bernard. And again, he plays in a much higher scoring offense, much better shot at a touchdown. Let's see, Jack, half PPR, MPJ or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're the GOAT. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Let's see. Jack, half PPR, MPJ or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're the GOAT. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Let's see. Jack, half PPR, MPJ or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're the GOAT. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. MPJ. Why am I blanking this? Who's MPJ? I'm confused on who this is, and I should probably know, but I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't know. So I'm gonna go Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because if I don't know who it is, then I'm struggling here. I'm gonna pull up wide receivers just in case I'm missing something. Yeah, I'm not sure, man. Michael Pittman Jr. maybe. Is that it? I don't know. If that's Michael Pittman, I've never seen him referred to as MPJ. But I'd go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire there. Let's see, Joseph, Allen Robinson, or Jarvis Landry, half PPR. So while Jarvis Landry has been solid in his games against Baltimore, he actually has. He's done pretty well against Marlon Humphrey. They haven't been like great games. Play Allen Robinson. I mean, Allen Robinson against a Bradley Roby-less Houston Texans secondary. That team is in bad shape. They really are. I know that David Montgomery is going to run on them, but again, David Montgomery is not the type of guy that he's going to rush for 200. He's not Derrick Henry. You know what I mean? So Allen Robinson is going to get some work. In games where Matt Nagy has done this before, where in games where he can build confidence for Trubisky, he'll do it. And I think that's why you see him in plus matchups. The Bears don't just run the ball constantly over and over. They do like to throw the ball, and this is a matchup where he can build some confidence. I think the Texans this year have intercepted, 3 passes all year, so it's almost like a chance for Trubisky to build some confidence as the Bears hang on by a thread under their playoff hopes. It's not happening, but I like Allen Robinson. Let's see. Chase Stanley asks, DeAndre Hopkins, Diggs, Jefferson, start 2. That's a weird problem to have, man. So I'm literally looking at my rankings right now. I have Stephon Diggs at 8. I have Hopkins at 10, and I have Jefferson at 11. That's 3 wide receiver ones. You really can't go wrong there. You really can't. Diggs, the matchup against Pittsburgh was not bad to begin with. Joe Hayden is not going to play, concussion. That's their top cornerback. He's out. So, Diggs is... I moved Diggs up because Hayden was out a little bit. Hopkins has a pretty tough matchup this week against James Bradberry. Bradberry has done a good job, but Hopkins overcame a tough matchup last week. Kyler Murray getting healthier. These are things that we wonder about. And then Jefferson. If you wanted to start Jefferson over Hopkins, I wouldn't fault you for it. I really wouldn't, but I don't know if I could do it myself. Chase, need one, half flex, half PPR. Michael Pittman, T. Higgins, or Hunter Henry. Okay, I like Henry quite a bit. I like T. Higgins too. So here's the issue I have with T. Higgins. If I knew T. Higgins were healthy and if I knew that T. Higgins were going to play all 4 quarters, I'd be like, oh, I think T. Higgins is like a kind of a must play against Dallas, because Dallas, in terms of like points per target, efficiency metric, we know T. Higgins gets targets, right? No matter who the quarterback is. So from an efficiency metric, the Cowboys are like, I think they're the worst defense in the league, allowing, I'm just going to pull it up just to make sure. Yep. 2.13 PPR points per target. Just think about that for a second. If a wide receiver, any wide receiver, got 10 targets, okay, even if he was just average, he would score 21.3 PPR points against Dallas. Think about that for a second. So, I want to believe in T. Higgins, but he did miss a lot of practice time this week, and he was questionable up to today. Again, he's expected to play, and he's probably going to be fine. I don't know if I could play him over Hunter Henry, though. I like Henry quite a bit against that Atlanta defense. Again, the concern with the whole entire thing against Atlanta is that there's so many plus matchups in the field. You have to worry about them cannibalizing each other. But I like Justin Herbert a lot this week. I have him ranked as my quarterback 3, and if I like him that much, I have to like Hunter Henry. I have to like everybody in that offense. So I'm going to play Hunter Henry just because I think it's a safer play. But T. Higgins is a good one. Barb asks, Dobbins or Connor full PPR? I think I answered that one already for someone else, but it's James Conner. Best of luck. Non-PPR, would you play Mike Davis or Dobbins? I'd play Davis still. Because again, even if he has a timeshare, it's more of like an 80-20 timeshare, whereas Dobbins is in like let's call it a 40-30-30 or 40-35-25, whatever it is. It's a messy timeshare. Can they change that? Absolutely, they can change that. And all of a sudden, J.K. Dobbins becomes the workhorse, and you're like, oh, J.K. Dobbins getting 20 touches now. That's something we have to adjust to when it actually happens, but it hasn't happened yet. Let's see here. All right. And by the way, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This show has been so much fun to do this year. You know, you guys popping in every week, all the questions you guys submit. It's been a blast. I thank you. I wouldn't be here without you. If you guys could do me a favor, thanking us for that, just click the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because again, we are here every single week. We're going to be here for the next 2 weeks for you guys. We're going to continue to do videos throughout the off season. We're going to bring you tons of NFL draft coverage. We actually did it this past year. We did a live coverage of the NFL draft where Yates and I kind of just went back and forth, and we talked about every single pick from a team standpoint, from an NFL standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint. So it's like, you know, that instant analysis. We want to be there for you guys throughout the entire off season because, well, let's be honest, the NFL really doesn't have an offseason anymore. So thank you guys so much for the support on the show this year. Not going anywhere. I'm still here for another half hour, so don't think that I'm signing off or anything. Let's see. No Smoking Zone, Tyler Boyd or Kiki QT, and a half PPR. Ooh, this one is so tough. It is so tough, right? Because QT should have got a bump in the rankings, and he did get a bump in my rankings, after we heard that Brandon Cooks was ruled out. Some people think that it's going to be tougher for him because, oh, well, he's out. They could put more attention. The Bears can't change their game plan in terms of what they plan for all week on the fly like that. They can't say, oh, we're gonna change our coverage because Kiki QT. They're not going to do that. Buster Screen is out for this game, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Buster Screen is the Bears slot cornerback who's typically there. He's allowed more yardage in his coverage than any other slot cornerback in the league this year. But he's out. So, the Bears have a backup playing in the slot, so it is actually a good matchup. I don't know how they're going to deploy QT, if they're going to move him out to the perimeter a little bit more. It's really tough to say because the Bears are tough on the perimeter. They've struggled a little bit over the middle of the field to tight end and slot receivers. Tyler Boyd, the matchup against Dallas, it just doesn't get a whole lot better than that. Dallas has allowed a lot of wide receiver production. I think I might go with QT because, again, this is one of those questions that we go back to earlier in the show, and I say if you're torn between two players that are in the same territory, maybe you choose the guy with the better quarterback. And obviously Deshaun Watson is a much better quarterback than Brandon Allen. I do think Boyd's a good play. I'm going to look at my rankings just so I can tell you the honest truth with no emotion involved in this one. I have QT at 33. I have Tyler Boyd at 35. So my process of talking through that with you, it kind of worked. All right. Brett asked, Robert Tonyan or Henry? I'd play Henry personally. I mean, I understand. ECR disagrees with me on that one. ECR actually they have Robert Tonyan high, and I mean, I think Tonyan's a fine play, but the guy has not seen more than 5 targets in like a month, and this is a negative game script. The Detroit Lions teams, when they go up against them, teams generally target their tight ends less. Again, we don't know if that has to do with the scheme, but if you look even at the opponents they've played in terms of what they averaged in non-Lions games and then against Lions, it's less. It is less. So teams are targeting their tight ends less, and if he was already getting just 5 targets, it's like, it's really difficult for me to recommend a guy that starts that's going to get maybe 3 to 5 targets in a game, whereas Hunter Henry, a guy that always gets targeted, and he has one of the best matchups that you could ask for against the Atlanta Falcons. So I'd play Hunter Henry. I know I'm probably alone in that, but I'm playing Hunter Henry. All right. Shannon asks, need flex PPR, Ezekiel Elliott, T.Y. Hilton, Godwin. So hard to trust Zeke this year. I get it. I really do. But you play Ezekiel Elliott there. You play him against the Cincinnati Bengals. So the reason it's been difficult to trust Zeke, not only has he had a tough schedule, ever since Dak Prescott went down, he really has. But he's also been a big underdog in those games, and he's not being heavily utilized in the passing game. He's gotten a few targets here and there, but he's not like the guy that he was with Dak Prescott on the field. So that's why things have kind of gone downhill since, that happened. And obviously the offensive line has not been very good. However, against Cincinnati, this is the first game we're going to see them favored, to win. They may have been favored in the first Washington game, but they really had no business being favored just because they were Dallas. But this is a game where they're favored. You go into a Cincinnati, a team that's clearly in rebuild. They traded away some pieces at the trade deadline. They've allowed over 5 yards per carry on the ground. Ezekiel Elliott does lead the NFL with carries inside the red zone or inside the 5-yard line. I can't remember which one it was, but he's getting those high expected volume touches, expected efficiency point, whatever. I'm trying to figure that out. But either way, I play Zeke. I really do. Hilton was a guy that struggled for a long time. Godwin's a safe option for Brady. I do like Godwin, but I wouldn't play him over Zeke, though. Let's see. Lane asks start one, full PPR, J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, Kareem Hunt. I would play Dobbins and hope for the best is what I would do. So Miles Sanders, I've already talked about the problems I have with him this week. Kareem Hunt, he basically, if he's not scoring, it doesn't matter. So I don't know. Let's see. Dismiss that. All right. Something got in the way there. Something popped up. So yeah, I'd go with Dobbins and hope for the best. Kareem Hunt, again, he's been playing in that backup role to Nick Chubb. It's not a great matchup against Baltimore. So with Kareem Hunt, unless he scores a touchdown, he's finishing as a mid to low end RB3, which is obviously not great. And I don't think you want to rely on a touchdown in this matchup, especially knowing that Nick Chubb has been better in the red zone as of late. And the Browns seemingly have started to realize that, and they've been starting to go to him more and more. Let's see, Christian, full PPR, Robbie Anderson or Corey Davis. I'd play Robbie Anderson. I think he's an auto play this week. Robbie Anderson, not only was he getting heavily targeted with DJ Moore in the lineup, but now that DJ Moore is out, you figure he's going to get a bump there, which is that's good, cool. And then you look at Denver and you say, who's going to cover him? They legitimately are down. There's 3 starting cornerbacks. This week they lost them all. Bryce Callahan, gone to IR. Asang Bassi, gone to IR. AJ Bouye, gone to suspension. They have backup cornerbacks playing against Robbie Anderson, a guy that's been getting 7+ targets pretty much every single game, and now without DJ Moore. So Robbie Anderson, to me, he's kind of an auto play. I think you have to play him this week. I love Corey Davis. I have Corey Davis as a top 24 wide receiver. I have number 20, actually. But I cannot sit Robbie Anderson this week. All right. Greg asked, PPR Marvin Jones or DeAndre Washington? This one's tough because with Kenny Golladay out, Marvin Jones is going to see a lot of J.R. Alexander, one of the better cornerbacks in the league. But volume is volume. It's hard to pass that up. But at the same time, you go back to DeAndre Washington. The volume is there. The matchup is good against Kansas City. I would play DeAndre Washington. I would. I'd take the guaranteed touches there. Mr. Lombardo, A.J. Brown or Mike Davis, full PPR. Whew. That is so tough to sit. I don't think that I can sit A.J. Brown. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen if Sidney Jones has been, if he's been cleared to play for this game. I don't know if C.J. Henderson's going to play in this game. I'm gonna pull it up real quick because I want to know. Let's see. Sidney Jones, he's listed as questionable. Did they ever even activate? I don't even know if they activated C.J. Henderson. All right. So basically, Mike Davis or A.J. Brown, I don't know, man. This is so tough because again, Mike Davis is used in the passing game as well, so the full PPR doesn't even help A.J. Brown so much. I don't think I could sit A.J. Brown against the Jags, man. I don't think I can do it. The guy is just too good because again, once they get the ball in his hands, you have to tackle him, and I don't think the Jaguars can tackle. That one's really. Oh. There has to be someone else you could play those guys over. It has to be someone else. But I guess if I had to pick, I'd say A.J. Brown. Let's see. Michael asked, PPR sit 1. Antonio Brown, Boyd, DeAndre Washington. If I were to sit one of them, I guess it would be Boyd. I like Antonio Brown's matchup this week. I really do against Minnesota. Minnesota has some young cornerbacks in the perimeter, and they've been better in the slot. So if Chris Godwin's limited a little bit, I do expect them to attack those perimeter cornerbacks. And Antonio Brown working himself into game shape. He's played 3 games now, had his bye week, so he's had a chance to kind of settle in the offense. And I do believe that one of those games is going to come where you're going to be like, oh, yep, there's Antonio Brown. That's that guy. So I have him ahead of those guys in the rankings, or ahead of Boyd, I should say. And then Henderson, I would play over Boyd just because of the guaranteed touches. So, yeah, I guess Boyd is the one I would sit, which is kind of crazy. Xavier asks, Crowder versus QT, full PPR. Well, we don't have word on Jamison Crowder just yet, but I don't think he's going to play. That's my honest take. So if we don't hear anything before the noon games begin, which, if I'm not mistaken, the Bears are playing at noon. Yes, that's a noon game. If we do not hear anything on Jamison Crowder before the Bears start, I would play QT over Crowder. Actually, you know what? I'm going to play QT over Crowder no matter what. Screw it. I don't think Crowder's playing, but I'm just saying that. Watson versus Tannehill, big boy. I would play Ryan Tannehill. The Bears, they've struggled a bit as of late. They really have. that secondary is starting to fall apart, and I think it's the team just slowly losing. Like they're just, I don't want to say they're giving up, but they're slowly losing some of that luster, some of that scariness that they had. And I liked Deshaun Watson a little bit before all these things started piling up, but eventually there's just so many injuries that are happening that you have to account for it, and you have to say, you know what? Even if Deshaun Watson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, if he has no, supporting cast, it's going to hurt. And in this matchup against the Bears, it's enough to downgrade him. Whereas Tannehill, he gives you a solid floor. That matchup, the Jags should be able to do, or the Titans should be able to do whatever they want against the Jags. And Ryan Tannehill, the last time those two teams played earlier in the year, he threw 4 touchdowns against them. So, and that's when they actually were healthy. So, I'd play Tannehill. Kyle, full PPR, start 1, Higgins, QT, or Lazard. That one's down to Higgins or QT. If you're feeling lucky, if you're feeling like, you know what, I think T. Higgins is going to be fine. I think he's healthy. Play him. I think that he comes with a floor and a ceiling against Dallas. But, you do have to worry about the hamstring because, again, he was someone that was limited in practice throughout the week. He was questionable for the game. QT, probably a higher floor because if Kiki QT does not get at least 8 targets in this game, I'd be pretty surprised, to be honest with you. And again, the Bears have struggled a little bit over the middle of the field, so I would probably play Kiki QT over Higgins if I were looking for a floor. But again, if you're looking for a ceiling, I think Higgins probably gives you a slightly higher one, but you're taking some risk. Epic Designs, QT Lamb or T Higgins PPR. That was basically almost the same question. Crazy. So Lamb, I was watching for Mackenzie Alexander to whether or not he was going to play for the Bengals because he's the slot cornerback that they signed in free agency from the Minnesota Vikings. He's done a great job in the slot. However, he was questionable for this game. I have not seen anything pop up in regards to him, so I don't think I have an answer on that one just yet. If he's playing, then I would play QT or Higgins over him. And then obviously the last question I answered basically just it talked about QT and Higgins and depending on what you're looking for, that's going to determine, who you're going to play. All right, let's see. Doug, hey Tags. Hey, half PPR, wide receiver, tight end flex. Waller or thank you, Hilton? I don't like Waller's matchup at all this week, but I would still play him over T.Y. Hilton. Hilton, I understand that he's looked good the last couple of games, but guys, we cannot erase what's happened the entire season. It could just as easily be a Michael Pittman game. The Raiders do struggle against the run, so we should expect the Colts to come out and try and run the ball quite a bit against them. I think I have to go at Waller. He's just a higher floor play, and we already know the ceiling is there for Waller. So, yeah, I would play Waller. Dan, good morning, Tags. Good morning. Please pick one, half PPR, QT, DJ Chark, or Antonio Brown. Thanks. All right, so this one's tough, right? QT, I've talked about him quite a bit. DJ Chark is someone that, with Mike Glennon under center, we've only seen him with him for one game. It wasn't great. It hasn't been great for DJ Chark most of the year. But that game script should go in his favor where the Jags, James Robinson's dealing with an injury. Laviska Shenault had to leave the game a little bit last week with an injury. You have to think the game script would be there, but I'm hesitant to go back into Chark. I liked Chark last week in what was a negative game script, but nothing really came of that. So we can't love him too much. And then Antonio Brown, talked about Antonio Brown. So, I have Chark, I think, ranked. Yeah, I have Chark ranked at 27, Antonio Brown 28. So I guess Chark is the one, and you're kind of hoping for the best. The matchup is there. It's a good matchup for him. He can get it done. He should get the most targets on that team, but there is some risk. Jess, Ebron or Goddard PPR. I would play Ebron. Ebron, that matchup against Buffalo is just so good for tight ends. He has been getting targeted a ton. I don't think people realize how much Ebron has been getting targeted in that offense. And again, if we start taking targets away from Deontay Johnson because he's dealing with all these drops, Ebron's had his problems too. But if we start doing that, there's no one that could take away Ebron's job. It's not going to be Vance McDonald, right? So they're going to continue to target Ebron. I like him. Goddard, not only is it a bad matchup against the New Orleans Saints, the Saints have been so good against tight ends ever since they allowed Darren Waller that big game in week 2. After that, they've been a shutdown team that you really don't want to play tight ends again if you could help it. On top of that, we have Zach Ertz, who played a small role last week. I think they were easing him back into the offense. He's fine. So he should have a bigger role. So they're splitting targets between the tight ends there. And then all of a sudden you go to Jalen Hurts under center. You don't know what to expect, right? So Jalen Hurts wasn't a guy that when he came into the game last week, he didn't target the tight ends a whole bunch. He really didn't. So I think Goddard actually had all of his catches with Wentz under center. So, I would expect less passing in general out of the Eagles offense. We don't know if it was Carson Wentz that targeted the tight end so much, or if it's just the offensive scheme, or whatever the case is. But I think there's enough questions to move Goddard down, like lower expectations. I play Ebron. Thomas asked, Brandon Ayuk or Curtis Samuel? I have Curtis Samuel higher. Washington's been a tough matchup. You know, teams just have not scored a whole lot of points against Washington. They've been like a top 5 defense in terms of the fantasy points allowed overall to all positions. So we can't pretend that, you know, the 49ers are a high potent offense that is going to overcome that. I see that as a lower scoring game. Whereas Curtis Samuel, he's been the best Panthers wide receiver. I think, I can't remember how many weeks it was, because basically we went back, you know, like I think over the last 5 games or whatever it was, Curtis Samuel's been the best wide receiver for the Panthers in terms of fantasy. And it's really been quite a distance between him and Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, but he's been crazy efficient. And do we expect that to keep up? No, we don't. You know, he's eventually going to level out, right? But it seems like this Panthers coaching staff has figured out how to use Curtis Samuel to, you know, to his skill set rather than just having run down the field like they did last year over and over. You know, with DJ Moore out of the lineup, I would expect a higher volume for him. Christian McCaffrey out of the lineup, I would expect him to get a few carries. I just think there's a really good floor for someone like Curtis Samuel this week. Dawson asked, Evan Ingram or Logan Thomas? Logan Thomas, the matchup against San Francisco, so bad. It was really bad against Pittsburgh last week, too. Evan Ingram, the matchup against Arizona, not good either. I guess I'll go at Logan Thomas, considering we've seen him overcome bad matchups. We haven't really seen that so much with Evan Ingram. So I guess I'll go Logan Thomas and hope for the best. Mellon plays Devontae Parker or Sterling Shepard. I still go Parker. I'm not excited about it. I don't like Devontae Parker so much this week. Obviously, with Tua under center, he's not nearly as valuable. The Kansas City defense has allowed the fewest wide receiver yards per game dating back to the start of last year. I don't love Parker this week, but Sterling Shepard, I can't pretend that Daniel Jones coming back is going to be a massive boost for him either. He'll be better, sure, but All right, Darrell. Swift or Hunt? I would play DeAndre Swift. It's not even that close for me, honestly. DeAndre Swift, even if he was involved in a 50-50 timeshare, his matchup is better against the Packers. His role that he's used in terms of like the heavy passing down back for the Lions against in a negative game script against the Packers. You know, the Packers are a bottom 3 team against the run. They can't stop anybody through the air or on the ground. It's just a matter of getting that volume. And again, in a negative game script, you're not going to see a whole lot of Adrian Peterson. So I would play DeAndre Swift. Lauro asked, full PPR flex, T.Y. Hilton or DeAndre Swift. Michael asked 2. All right, so there's 4 players there. We got to narrow it down, guys. 2 or 3 players. Jay asked, Christian Kirk or Allen Lazard standard. I actually like Christian Kirk more than most this week. I'm looking right now. Yeah, I have Kirk over Lazard because I have game script concern issues with Allen Lazard. Christian Kirk, if you look at James Bradbury and say, James Bradbury is going to cover DeAndre Hopkins, and let's say he's not going to shut him down, but even if he limits him, the production has to come from somewhere, right? And the Giants haven't been a team that you really run the ball a whole lot on, so I do like Christian Kirk in a bounce back here. I have him over Kirk. Garrett asked, full PPR, Evan Ingram or Mike Gesicki? I'll go at Gesicki. That's where you're going to kind of hope for the narrative that, you know, the Dolphins fall behind and they have to throw the ball a ton. That's what you're hoping for. And against tight ends, they've been, I'm going to call them an average defense against tight ends. Tyrann Mathieu is probably going to be the one I would think to cover Mike Gesicki, but he was actually highly questionable for this game. He is going to play, but I would play Mike Gesicki over Evan Ingram just because Ingram's matchup against Arizona, that's been a tough matchup this year. Like, teams have not played very well, or tight ends have not played well against Arizona at all. It's a total flip-flop from last year. Old man Dan, T.Y. Hilton, Kiki QT, or T. Higgins. All right, I think I already answered that one. I want to make sure I get to as many as I can. Sit Murray for Tannehill? I probably would. Kyler Murray has not been running the ball ever since he suffered that shoulder injury, and now you look at a matchup against the New York Giants, and you're kind of like, the Giants have been really good. I don't think people realize how good the Giants have been. People saw Russell Wilson get shut down last week. Not shut down, but limited against that team, and they were kind of like, ooh, But the Giants have actually been pretty good. They haven't been bad at all. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they've allowed the fewest rushing yards to quarterbacks this year. I could be wrong on that. They've allowed the third fewest yards to quarterbacks on the ground this year. So even if Kyler Murray is getting some of his mobility back, I think I'd probably go with Tannehill. I think it's just a safer floor. In a week like this, you don't really want to take a whole lot of chances unless you're like a major underdog in your matchup. Let's see. Anthony asked, Ayuk, Debo, QT, half-point PPR. I'd probably go with Debo. I think that the 49ers have to get creative with the way that they use their wide receivers in this game because Washington, if we know anything about them, they bring the pressure, right? It's almost like going back to the Rams, right? Like when the 49ers play the Rams, they get Deebo Samuel the ball behind the line of scrimmage. They get the ball in the flats, whatever they have to do to get the ball in his hands and let him create after the catch. I think that's the best plan of attack against that Washington team. That's the best way to slow down that pass rush because they have to keep their heads up. So I would say Deebo Samuel is probably my play there. QT is a safe play, but I don't know if the ceiling is there compared to someone like Deebo, so I'll go Deebo. Suf for flex. Chris Godwin, Naheem. Okay, there's 4 guys. Narrow it down. Jake asked Kareem Hunt or Jamal Williams PPR. I have Kareem Hunt slightly higher than Jamal Williams. I think Jamal Williams is a fine play as like an RB3 flex, but I do have Hunt ranked higher than him. Let's see. Thomas asked, good morning, Tags. Good morning. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for supporting what I do. Full PPR, Perriman, Chark, or Samuels, or Curtis Samuel. I'm guessing that means in the flex. I would go with Curtis Samuel if that's who's there. He would be the one I would play. I talked about him just a moment ago in regards to the role he has in the offense. Perriman's a good tournament play. He's a good, Hail Mary. Like just kind of like, you know what? Whatever. I'm going to trust a Jets wide receiver. He'd be the one to trust, but it's still a Jets receiver. Let's see. Will Hayden asks, hey Tags, what's your take on Ryan Tannehill versus Lamar this week? Lamar is probably my preferred play. Here's the thing. Ryan Tannehill in the consensus rankings is like 4, which is kind of crazy to me. And the reason I'm saying that, it's not because he's not going to be a good. If they asked him to throw the ball 35 times, he'd probably finish that high, maybe. But my issue is that Derrick Henry's going to run all over that team. And if Derrick Henry's running all over them, you could see Tannehill throw the ball 22 times. That's a realistic possibility. So that's his ceiling is going to be limited in this game. His floor should be there because, again, when he does throw the ball, he's going to be efficient. I would play Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has been running the ball recently. He's looked good doing it. He's played extremely well against Cleveland the last 3 times they played, so I would go with Lamar Jackson. Let's see. Subscribed and liked. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it, man. Full PPR, need a wide receiver 2 and a flex. Devontae Parker, T.Y. Hilton, and T. Higgins. All right, so this is the time where I'd be willing to take the risk with T. Higgins, and I would actually play him. And then it comes down to the other one is Devontae Parker or T.Y. Hilton. I'll go with Parker, again, hoping for that touchdown against the Chiefs because I don't see him racking up a whole lot of yards. But T.Y. Hilton, again, we cannot erase what's happened for 85% of the season just because T.Y. Hilton's come on just a little bit as of late. I understand you want to trust him, and we are slowly moving in more of the circle of trust with T.Y. Hilton, but we're not quite there where you just automatically plug him in. So I'd play Higgins and Parker of those guys. Chris asks, PPR, would you start Gallman, Debo, or Ayuk for flex? Gallman. I don't think anybody realizes just how damn good Wayne Gallman has been ever since that he's kind of took over this job. I'm not kidding, guys. Like, he's been ridiculously good. If you look through his game log and kind of see who he's played, that's the most impressive part of all, is that he's played, here's his games. He played against Philadelphia, one of the best run defenses in football, finished as the RB14. He played against Tampa Bay, probably the best run defense in football, finished the RB16. Washington, a team that has limited opponents in fantasy in general, RB6. Philadelphia, again, RB10. Cincinnati, good matchup. We expected that. RB11. Last week, Seattle, that's a mediocre matchup. Game script was going to be negative, we thought, but he finished as the RB15. So he's finished as the RB16 or better now in 6 straight weeks, yet people don't want to trust him. Against Arizona, a team that lost Corey Peters a couple weeks ago, haven't been the same run defense since that time. I like Wayne Gallman. He's good. Let's see. Let's see here. I'm just looking through the breaking news right now. Leonard Fournette is a healthy scratch. Not going to play. Good for Ronald Jones. It's really good for Ronald Jones. I would expect I don't know if it's I'm guessing they're going to have LaShawn McCoy and rookie. Why am I forgetting his name right now? Keyshawn Vaughn. I'm guessing they're going to have both those guys active with Fournette out. But I don't. You don't want to play them. Daniel Jones officially active. Ezekiel Elliott officially active. Okay. Blah 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 blah. Christian McCaffrey officially ruled out. T. Higgins active. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I caught up with those news and that I didn't let you guys leave here not knowing what was happening. Let's see. Hey, tags full PPR. Reed, Schultz, or Akins. Thanks in advance. So this is a good question, B Dollar. I meant to bring him up, and I'm so happy that you did. If you are looking for a last-minute streamer at tight end, and if you don't feel confident in the tight end you have in your lineup, Jordan Akins is a good play. The Bears are suddenly the team that's allowing the third most fantasy points per game to tight ends. They've been beat over the middle of the field. Tight ends, if you look at even adjusted schedule rank, they're one of the best matchups in the league for tight ends. Jordan Akins, when he does get targeted, he's been good in terms of like his yards per target is there. He is a guy that's big enough to be used in the red zone. The Texans are just out of options right now. I expect Jordan Akins to be used somewhat like a wide receiver, and I would be shocked if he finishes this game with fewer than 5 or 6 targets. I really would. So I like Jordan Akins this week, and I actually moved him ahead of those guys earlier, like literally right before the show. So I like Jordan Akins a little bit. Gordon asked Antonio Brown or Curtis Samuel. I like Antonio Brown, but I'm not going to play him over Curtis Samuel. Samuel, we know what his role is. We know the touches are going to be there. With Brown, it's a little bit of forecasting. We're hoping they take that step forward. We're hoping that he doesn't get cannibalized by Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Rob Gronkowski, because those guys have good matchups too, So that's the only concern with Brown, where Samuel I don't have those concerns about against backup cornerbacks. So I'd go Curtis Samuel. James, good morning, tags. Good morning. PPR, Dobbins, Gio, or Jamal Williams. I'm going to throw up now. I'd play Dobbins and hope for the best. Seriously. I'm going to try and answer as many of these questions as I can real quick, guys. All right. Pick 2, Gio, Kiki, QT, Miles Sanders, half PPR. Cali Music, I'd play Gio, and I would probably play Kiki, QT. It feels gross saying that. I'd play QT over Miles Sanders, but I think I might be there. It's really close between those two. Yeah, I'd probably play QT. I think I would, which is weird. Let's see. Edward asks, PPR, Miles Sanders, Juju, or Kiki? Yeah, Kiki, QT. I would play Juju Smith-Schuster of those 3 options. Quinn asks, hey, tags McKissick over Gordon in a half-point PPR format. I would play in a half point. I might go with Gordon. If it was a full point, I would really consider McKissick, but I'll go Gordon. Alana asked Edmonds or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, half PPR. I would play Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Hove, Tannehill, or Brady. Ooh, I have Brady higher, and I know that I'm alone. I know that that is not the consensus rank, and that is different, and that's fine. I like Brady. Jimmy asked PPR, Lockett, Swift, or Rojo. Yeah, Rojo got a bump for sure. It's not a great matchup against Minnesota though. So I don't want to take away. Oh man, Lockett. How can you not play Lockett against the Jets? How do you not do that? I know that he hasn't been very good this year. Outside of a couple games. You play all of those, Jimmy. I don't even know how to answer this question, to be honest. You have to find a way to play Lockett. Find a way to get him in your lineup. As for Swift or Rojo, I guess I'll stick with my ranking here. I have Swift. I have Swift at 13. I have Jones at 14. That's so close. Let's see. Jorge. Nope. Sorry, it disappeared. I don't know what happened. Dylan, Miles Sanders, T. Higgins, DJ Chark, half PPR. I guess I'll go Sanders there. Hope for the best. Mike asks, full PPR, Gallman or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'd play Gallman. All right. Eddie asks, what's up, Mike? What's up, dude? Who do you consider for more upside, Justin Herbert or Ryan Tannehill? I would play Justin Herbert. James asked, Tyler Boyd or DeAndre Washington, full point PPR. Give me the guaranteed touches with DeAndre Washington. I don't have to worry about Brandon Allen throwing to my wide receiver. Any defenses worth streaming this week? I'm playing the Packers defense with Chicago's defense on my bench. I don't necessarily think. It just depends on who's available. It's so tough to answer a streaming question at this point in the week because you don't really know who's available in the leagues. Hey Mike, full PPR, Deebo Samuel or Curtis Samuel? I have Curtis Samuel slightly higher. David asks full PPR, Gio, Miles Sanders, J.D. McKissick, and a full PPR. Full PPR, I'd go J.D. McKissick. Thomas asks Curtis Samuel or Kiki QT. I'd play Curtis Samuel. Jonathan asked Allen Robinson or Deontay Johnson in a standard league. I would play Allen Robinson. Guys, Dan Harris, one of the nicest guys out there. Go over there and tell him I said hello. He's filling in for Yates on the show after this one. Dan is top 20 accuracy on the season. He's always in the best. So make sure you go check out his stream. That we're posting the link in the chat right now. Go check him out if I didn't get to your question. And if for whatever reason you still want my opinion, go check out the primer. It's on the website. It's the primer week 14. You're able to see a paragraph on every player from every game that I wrote this week. And I really do wish you guys the best of luck in your playoff matchups. I want to see you back here next week. And so the best of luck to you guys. Go talk to Dan. Tell him that I said, hi, Woody. Do whatever you want to do. But thank you guys so much for the support. I appreciate it. It's been awesome. Until next time, lights out.